Good morning, y'all. Hope you had fun watching the beef Wellington recipe that we made yesterday. Today we are going to make Boeuf Bourguignon or beef Bourguignon, however you guys pronounce it. I say Boeuf Bourguignon. Boeuf Bourguignon is a braised dish, so it cooks for a long time, and it probably originated in the Middle Ages sometime back then because it's kind of easy to make. It's a cheap cut of meat for the most part, at least at the time, and those were made with those cheap cuts that nobody else wanted. So it's kind of one of those comfort food peasant dish. I really like them. I really like that kind of cuisine. And Boeuf Bourguignon means, it's a dish from the region of Burgundy in France. And I'm going to actually show you because I have a map of France. Can I not switch this? Anyway, I'm going to show you this way. All right. So this is a map of France right here. And the Burgundy region is right here. So we have 6 big regions in France, and each region is divided into departments. So these 4 departments right here constitute the Burgundy region. They make a lot of wine over there. So Boeuf Bourguignon is made with wine, usually with wine from the Burgundy region. It's harder to come by here. It's pretty expensive, so I'll just use some regular Merlot. But so this is France. Just for the little story, France, the whole country, is a little smaller than Texas in size. So we're a little smaller than Texas. We have about approximately 65 to 67, 68 million people. And there is a very, very varied landscape. So, of course, we have the Atlantic Ocean right here. And I think you call that the Northern Sea, or we called it the sleeve because it looks like a small sleeve between France and England above. And then we have the Mediterranean Sea right at the bottom. We have mountains too, all right here. All that is mountains, the Alps, and we have the Pyrenees right here at the border with Spain. So in the south, it gets pretty hot in the summer. In the north, not as much. This is where I'm from. I'm from the region of Brittany, which is this, right at the end of it. And so the winters up here are kind of like here, pretty mild. But summers are a lot better than here because it doesn't usually get past 78 degrees and we need a little sweater at night. It rains quite a bit though. So not those hard rains like here. It drizzles all day. Anyway, so the Provence that you've probably heard of is around here. They do a lot of vegetables here, olive oil. They cook more with olive oil and oils down here. The cuisine from south of France is usually healthier than the one from the north. Up north, we have a lot of butter. We have Normandy right here, up there. In Brittany, we raise a lot of pigs, so it's a lot of milk and butter, whereas it tends to be healthier in the south. Right here in Bordeaux, big cuisine down here. This is actually where I was born, where my mom's family is from. So they have a lot of vineyards down here too, but all that is foie gras and duck confit, all that comes from over here. Anyway, just wanted to show you where the name Bourguignon is from. It means from Burgundy. And we'll just start. It's going to be a lot shorter than yesterday. The recipe is actually quite simple. It just cooks forever. Okay, so I am going to start with the mise en place, if I can figure this out. I've done some of it yesterday already. I did, the recipe calls for 6 ounces of what we call lardon. It's just bacon, pork belly. If we were in France, my lardon would be a lot thicker, but about this size. So that I did yesterday, and like I told you yesterday too, during the beef Wellington, I'm using brisket for this particular recipe, but I did it about a couple of weeks ago with beef stew meat, and it worked just as well. So I did already cut the brisket in about 2-inch chunks, and I will get it out a little later. And I let it dry up in the fridge overnight, so my meat is really dry and it's gonna brown properly. Okay, so mise en place is actually pretty quick for this recipe. Let me adjust this so you guys can see. I've got the recipe right here. I think Chef Cat is posting it on Blackboard for you guys. I am choosing the stovetop method, but you can also totally do it in your oven. I mean, the second part of it, the braising. But I kind of like the stovetop method better because I can control the simmering better. For having made that recipe before, I'm gonna change just very few things, just one thing. The recipe here calls for 1 big carrot, and I thought that was not enough, so I got 3, kind of 2.5. But I want a little more carrots with this. I'll just add a little bit more liquid, not a whole lot, just a little bit more to make up because the carrots will absorb the liquid. So mise en place is actually, it's going to be quick. We have to peel and chunk the carrots. So I mean, there's no, you guys know how to do this, right? Peel your carrots. Love those kind of Y-shaped peelers. And we're gonna cut them in about half-inch chunks. And about same thing for the onion. The onion, I want to show you something on how to cut it. Doesn't take a genius, but some people forget about a couple things when dicing onions. Okay, so carrots. We want the pieces of carrots to be all even. I mean, that's a constant in cooking. You always want even pieces so everything cooks evenly. When you have a really small chunk of carrot and a big one, obviously one will be ready before the other. All right, let me throw that away. Okay, so carrot about 1/2 inch. This one I'm gonna leave about whole. But this right here, you can tell one side is a lot thicker than the other. So I'll cut this one just like so. And so it is a little more even. I will cut this one in half. And same with this one. All right. Here is the 1 carrot. If you do this at home, which I hope you will, I let you decide how much carrot you want to put in there. When I try a new recipe, which I mean I've made Boeuf Bourguignon many times over the years before, but I always try the recipe as it is written. I don't change anything. I just follow the recipe and then I adjust to my liking. Okay, remember what I told you yesterday about knives? What you need: a chef knife, a paring knife, a bread knife, and a filleting knife. Let me add one thing to this, and I actually have a few. I like this one because it's kind of flexible. This one not near as much. It is good to have a serrated knife, a small one, because these come in handy to cut tomatoes, the harder things. And when I cut my onion, I like to do it with a serrated knife, but that's also a question of personal preference. All right, so onion, of course we gotta peel it. Sometimes it's so you know, the papery skin at first, of course we remove that. We don't want to eat that, but as you can see, the second layer is not much better. And even if I didn't have that papery skin right here on top, you can tell it's kind of wrinkled, it's in bad shape. So pretty often, more often than not, I remove the first layer of the onion too. And right here, I'm gonna get rid of this. Okay. Oh, by the way, I realized yesterday you never really see me wash my hands, but I promise I do. I'm a big hand washer. So don't forget to wash your hands, and you should always wash your hand more than once when you're cooking. Wash them regularly. Okay, so we're gonna chop that onion in half inch chunks again. So cut it in half. Of course, there's the root, and right here, what I like to do is just remove it with kind of a V. And sometimes, you know, you have just like the garlic and those little root ends right here. You want to get rid of that because it's a little bitter. I mean, we're gonna cook it. It wouldn't be a big deal, but get into good habits right away. Oops. Okay, so best way to chop an onion, and these are kind of the flatter kind. So of course you're gonna go about every half inch right here, and then every half inch crosswise. If you notice, I am not cutting all the way through to the end. I'm keeping the end together because that way it's a lot better to keep, a lot easier to cut crosswise. It just stays together. So here it's kind of falling apart. So every half inch, same thing. I'm not cutting all the way through. So that's the culinary school way. That's the way we're taught to cut onions. And this end right here, just going to do this, and you don't want to lose that. Okay, same here. So I'm not cutting all the way through. And then about half inch from the bottom and half inch again on top. Okay, so always read the recipe before you start. so you know not only what you need, but what needs to be done first. Some recipes don't always make quite much sense in the order. So I know I'm gonna have to add the carrots and the onions all at once. So I'm putting them right in the same bowl right now. Okay, so now we are going to need some garlic. So here, 4 cloves. So garlic, we take care of it just very much just like the onions. I'm gonna remove the root end right here and just peel it. And I like to do my garlic, especially the first cuts, with a paring knife. And this one kind of comes right off. The one thing I don't like about garlic is that all these little pieces stick to your fingers. I really do not recommend using that garlic that is pre-minced, that is kept in that kind of vinegary solution to preserve it, because it totally ruins the taste of the garlic itself. When I had the restaurant, we used so much garlic that I did use one shortcut. I would buy those pre-peeled garlic cloves, because it saved us a lot of time. Because there were only 2 of us in the kitchen. But now at home, that I don't need to use gigantic amounts of garlic, I always buy it by the whole head. And plus, those whole heads will stay on your countertop. It'll stay good for a good 2 to 3 weeks. I'm gonna rinse my hands because I've got these little skins stuck. Okay, so one important thing about garlic, and I can already see it right here. See, you've got the sprout right here. We don't want that. Again, I guess since we're gonna cook it, it's not gonna, and for so long, it's not gonna matter as much. But especially if you're eating it raw, you don't want to keep that. So when I start a new head of garlic and I don't really know, because sometimes you don't see that little sprout, but see how big this one is? I always cut the first clove in half to see what's in there and to see if I need to remove anything, which I do right here. This one has it too. So this one, we want to, according to the recipe, we want to mince really thin. See, even those smaller cloves, thinner cloves, have them too. This one is really thin, but there's actually a big one in here. Okay, when we minced, the way I was taught in culinary school is kind of the same thing. So we're gonna mince it really fine, was like this. So I'm using the exact same technique of keeping it together at the end, because once you slice crosswise, it's a lot easier. And plus I kind of kept the root here, so I'm not gonna keep this. So that's the way we're taught. And then I worked under Daniel Bourguignon at Le Cirque, which is a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And when he saw me do this, he just kind of screamed at me and said, "What do you think? Where do you think you are, at culinary school?" So this right here doesn't really get the essence of garlic. I mean, it does, but not as much. So he showed me to, as much as you can, and this is kind of a little harder, to kind of crush your garlic first, and then you're gonna mince it, and that releases all the essence of the garlic clove. All right. Maybe I should crush it here. So I know that a lot of people like to just cut their garlic in kind of bigger chunks and then go like this all over. I'm not really a big fan of this because it makes for pieces that are uneven. I'd rather take the time to do it right. And I don't know about you guys, but especially when I cook at home, I usually have more time. And I kind of enjoy doing all this. All right, those thin pieces are actually harder. And notice, I know I've shared this with my high school students, when you, holding the knife, really important. Hold your knife, your chef knife, real close to the blade. You have a lot more control that way, as if you hold it like this. So, I know I've seen some people do this. To me, that is very uncomfortable, but it's whatever works best for you. I like to hold it right here, and you want to use the heel of your knife to cut, and the tip stays on the board. And don't forget to curl your fingers right here so it doesn't get all, you don't nick yourself. All right, so 4 garlic cloves. My fingers are all sticky. All right, a little word about chopping. Chopping, it's all experience. The more you do it, the better, the faster you're gonna become at it. I was very fortunate that when I was in culinary school, we had, in 1992, in the winter, we had the Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games in France that year. And the Olympic Games hired us students to do a lot of the mindless and thankless prep. And seeing that was pretty amazing. The kitchens for the Olympic Games were in a giant warehouse where they had installed the stoves, ovens, all that stuff. And we, along with a few other students from my culinary school, were just relegated to one corner with 3 or 4 stainless steel tables. And we worked there for 2 weeks, standing at those tables. And they would bring us insane amounts of, let's say, carrots. So 1,200 pounds of carrots to peel and cut in brunoise, which are those little tiny dices. Another 1,200 pounds of zucchinis to cut in small dices too. It was freezing in there. because of course in that big warehouse there was no heat. But for 2 weeks, all we did was just chop and chop and chop. I mean, just tons and tons of vegetables. By the end of day one, I had a huge blister right here. But I mean, that's where I learned how to chop, and I have lost some speed since then, but man, that was the best thing. So the more you chop, the better it's gonna be for you. So it's gonna take a while for you guys to work up to the better position in kitchen, or it should. I was surprised when I had my restaurant and hired younger people that after 2 or 3 months, they thought they were ready to be on the line to do the better stuff. I mean, you gotta pay your dues, y'all. And paying your dues, that's good. That should last a good 2-3 years to do those little jobs that, you know, kind of nobody else will do. But if you want to work your way to better positions in the kitchen, you've got to have the basics down big time. So don't be impatient, no matter what thankless job they give you, whoever, just do it and do it well. And don't complain about it. Okay, so I have my carrots and my onions ready. I have my garlic ready. And I think I got my bacon. This is optional in the recipe, pearl onions. I happen to have a few left. The recipe here calls for 12. I think I have 9. And the recipe here says to add it kind of at the beginning, but I'm actually gonna wait, because if you add them at the beginning after 3 hours of cooking, these things will have kind of melted in there. So while it's simmering at first, I will peel those, and I'll add those a lot later towards the end, about half an hour before the end, so they stay whole, because I like to bite into those. Anyway, so first we're gonna follow the recipe, because it's actually a good recipe. We're going to brown the bacon, and then we'll brown the meat. So I'm gonna move you guys to the, oh, there's one thing I forgot. The recipe is gonna call for, I think, about a teaspoon of chopped fresh thyme. So remember, we used fresh thyme yesterday, so I'm gonna get that ready now. So it's ready. I'm gonna rinse my knife because there's a bunch of garlic stuck to it. Not that it really matters if there were some garlic on the thyme, but my blade is sticky with all the garlic juices, so I don't want the thyme to stick to it too much. So just like we did yesterday, and I love thyme, so 1 teaspoon. I mean, I'm just gonna eyeball it, but sometimes I end up putting just a little more. And fresh herbs are not near as pungent, if you will, as the dried ones. So remember, you can't just substitute fresh for dried. I mean, you can, but not in the same amounts. From what I remember, if the recipe calls for, let's say, 3 teaspoons of fresh thyme, that would be 1 teaspoon of dried. It's a ratio of 1 to 3, I think. Use the fresh whenever you can, although sometimes dried is better. It just depends on the recipe. Here, fresh, 1 teaspoon. If you get a little bit of the stem here at the end, that's okay, because that stem is pretty tender. The stem that you don't want is the woodier part at the bottom. So if you can grow some of your own herbs at home, it's better. Herbs are really expensive here in the United States. So I've never been really successful at growing thyme. I don't know what it is about it that I'm doing wrong. But basil, oregano, sage, mint, I mean, that I grow every single year. And I save a bunch of money in the meantime. Those are really easy to grow. I grow them in pots. And but right now I have to buy this stuff when I need it. So 1 teaspoon. I mean, you can totally measure if you want to. I'm just gonna eyeball it, and I'm gonna, and they say it's 1 teaspoon of fresh thyme chopped, not 1 teaspoon of chopped thyme, so it's all different. Be careful, read the recipe carefully. It changes things. So you're supposed to have about 1 teaspoon, which is probably about this, so a little less, and then chop it. But I told you I kind of like thyme. I'm just gonna put a little more, chop it, and then put it aside because we're gonna use it pretty quickly. General rule for fresh herbs, you want to try to chop them as close to using them as you can, because they lose their value, if you will, if you chop them a long time ahead. Here, I'm gonna add this part right here. Okay, so I'm just gonna put it aside. We're gonna use it pretty soon. And the recipe also calls for chopped parsley to put in the dish, and that is to be divided. Some part is gonna be put at the beginning, and then at last to sprinkle on top. So it says 2 tablespoons fresh parsley, finely chopped, divided. I think we're gonna use 1 teaspoon from what I remember right now. Let me see what it says. And herbs. Yeah, about. So let me put that away. And I have some parsley right here. I already washed it. I used some of it the other day. So I'm gonna chop about 1 teaspoon right now, and no, 1 tablespoon, sorry. And I will chop the garnish later because it's gonna take a good 2-3 hours to cook. So, all right, here the stems wouldn't be a big deal either, but I don't know if it's my OCD side. I like to remove them, although the stems have a lot of vitamins in them, but especially those thicker stems, the tender ones right here, those are okay. You don't want the big ones. All right, so here I'm probably using a little more than what the recipe calls for. This is not what's gonna make a big difference in your final taste anyway. So when you chop herbs, I know some people like to use their food processor. I don't, because the food processor doesn't really cut the herbs. It kind of shreds them, and it doesn't really cut them in small pieces. It makes big chunks, kind of stringy chunks. I really don't like the texture. It bruises them more than anything, rather than cutting them. So even when I have large quantities of herbs to chop, I always do it by knife. So I recommend you do that too. Okay, so yeah, I probably have about 1.5 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons here. But it's okay. I mean, a little more parsley is not gonna hurt. All right, and we're gonna add those all at once a little later on. So I'm gonna keep them together right here. I'll throw this away. Remember, clean as you go. Then you've got less to worry about. All right, so I'm gonna move you guys to the stove and we're gonna start the cooking process. Just wash my hands. Before I move you, I want to show you my beef. So like I told you, I already cut it into chunks, and I don't know if you can see it. I did put a cooling rack inside of my pan. And I don't know if it shows really well on the camera, but this is dry. I mean, my pieces are totally dry, which is the secret to browning. So if you can, if you have time, always kind of dry your meat the night before in the fridge uncovered. And if not, just get paper towels and get it as dry as you can, although I find that this is by far the best method. When I have time, this is what I do. So here's my meat. And let's move to the stove. All right. Okay, I have a large Dutch oven right here. This one happens to be oval. I also have round ones. This is, remember what I told you about kitchen equipment yesterday? Go with the best that you can afford. And this one is a Le Creuset brand, which is a French brand. This I will pass on to my kids and grandkids because I've had this one for years and it won't die. It's perfect. Still all brown inside, but it's perfect. There's another brand, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it in English. I say Staub, S-T-A-U-B, which is another really good French brand. But either of those, I have bought kind of all of them, either at Tuesday Morning or TJ Maxx, because they have some real good deals on them sometimes. Full price for one of those, and this is a large one. If you buy it, I don't know, let's say at Williams Sonoma, you're gonna pay almost $400 for this one. But I think I bought this one for less than 200 bucks at TJ Maxx or Tuesday morning. I can't remember. So go often to these places, and when you see it, buy it if you can, because they will be gone. Anyway, so first we are browning the onion. So about medium high, and we're gonna saute that bacon until it's brown, and a little bit of olive oil. Oh, by the way, olive oil, there are some good olive oils out there, there's some bad ones. This one I find at Walmart, it's kind of a California blend. It's actually a very decent olive oil. Always favor, if you can, the glass bottles. Plastic and oil, not really the best. They get rancid faster in plastic. So whenever I can, I buy it in glass, or like this one, which is more of a finishing oil, in one of those metal containers. Again, when it comes to ingredients, you also pay, you get what you pay for most of the time. But that olive oil blend from California is surprisingly good. All right, so I got my bacon. Gonna wait until it's hot, and I will add it to it. Keep plate right here so I don't dirty things. So we're gonna brown the bacon, and then we will move it to a bowl, which I have, and then we will brown the meat into the bacon fat. And since I'm gonna need some, so this is what we got for the wine of Merlot. Kind of like the Merlot, it's kind of fruity a little bit. Don't go with the cheapest stuff when you buy wine for cooking, but I don't think you need to go with the most expensive either. Of course, we're gonna cook all the alcohol out. This is more for flavor than anything else. It is recommended that you cook with the wine that you're gonna drink. But again, if you're if you're drinking a Chateau Petrus, which is several $100s, I'm not sure you want to cook with that. Anyway. So the recipe calls for 2 to 3 cups of red wine, and then you adjust the amount of beef stock that you will use. I did use all 3 cups of red wine. That's what I'm gonna do again this time. So 3 cups of wine, just getting things ready. And then 2 cups of stock, and because I have just a few more carrots, I may need to add a little bit more. All right. So smoked bacon, we're gonna get it nice and brown, and that's gonna be flavor added to our Boeuf Bourguignon. So I don't have any beef stock in my freezer, not anymore, so I'm just using the store-bought stuff. Which is totally acceptable. So 2 cups, but I'm gonna keep it out just in case I need to add a little more. We'll see with what we have. So we are using the braising cooking technique, which is what we call a combination cooking technique. Combination cooking technique is first we use a dry cooking technique, in this case searing, and then we add liquid, so a moist cooking technique. There are 2 combination cooking techniques, there's braising and stewing. The only difference really between the 2 is that in braising, which is what we're doing here, you do not cover completely your food with liquid, whereas in stewing, you totally submerge the food in liquid. You'll see the top of our beef is going to be showing in this recipe. Okay, so we're really gonna brown this, because all of this, the more we brown it, and I'm not talking about burning, but the more we brown it, the more flavor it's gonna bring to our dish. So we just saute it for a few minutes until it's crisp and brown. And in the meantime, I'm going to be putting stuff away here. Remember, clean as you go. And clean as you go, which is kind of a little pointless at this time because it's just gonna splatter quite a bit. Okay, so right here we're getting kind of close. So when you do this, you don't want to walk away because you will burn. We're always gone longer than we think, and you will burn your bacon. You don't want to burn your bacon. Alright, see, it's really browning nicely. It is starting to crisp up quite a bit. I'm not going to let it go much longer because I don't want to burn it. So I have my bowl, and it's a large one because I will add the meat to this as I brown it. So I have a perforated spoon because I want to leave all that bacon fat in to sear the beef in. Alright, so I'm going to sear the beef in batches. I am not going to put the whole thing in there all at once, because if you put it all in there, it's not going to brown. That moisture that is still in the beef, even if the outside is dry, that beef is still full of moisture. It has to go somewhere, so it's going to evaporate into the air. If you bunch up all your meat together, that moisture doesn't have anywhere to go. It gets trapped in between the pieces and it ends up steaming more than browning. So I'm just going to leave some space between them. And I'll make as many batches as necessary. So we're going to brown it on all sides. And the recipe doesn't call for it right now. I'm hoping you can hear me because there's a big sear there. I'm going to salt and pepper as I go. Again, I want to build flavor up. So not a whole lot, because we're going to do that to all of them. Oh, I'm almost out. And one of the things, don't mess with it. Let it brown. If you stir it too much and too often, it's not going to have time to brown. So let it be. See, it's brown. I like it. A little more pepper on this side, salt on this side. And not too much. And keep you don't want to burn everything, but keep your heat pretty high so it stays really hot for the following batches. I'm going to add this to the bacon. And I'm just going to cook it in batches. So browning the beef is just for flavor. It's all these, those brown bits everywhere. It's called the Maillard reaction. It's actually a chemistry reaction. All of this is going to bring flavor to our broth. All right. So again, I want to leave the bacon fat in there. And I'm going to keep on adding my meat until it's all gone. A bit more salt and pepper. So Boeuf Bourguignon, it is good the day off, but it's even better the days after. I don't know what it is about those braised dishes. I love making that when I have people over because I can make it, you know, the day before, 2 days in advance, and just reheat it. And I can actually take care of my guests as opposed to staying in the kitchen. It's just great. You can serve that over pasta, over mashed potatoes, of course. I mean, everybody likes beef stew. I don't know anybody who doesn't like beef stew. I just see all those brown bits everywhere. Love those. That flavor. I'm going to make sure it really, really browns. You can always lift and see. And there are some hot spots in my pan. So some pieces are browning faster than others. So just check, like this one, not really. So I'm going to switch them because this one's brown. This one, not so much. So usually when you do that in batches, the subsequent batches don't brown quite as much as the first one. The first one gets the grunt of it. But, you know, I mean, I have all these brown bits everywhere. That's good with me. It's working. Alright, a little bit more salt on this side. So, third batch. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fit it all in here. Not quite. So check it. You don't want it to burn. My pot is really hot at this point. Alright, my stove is a little bit tilted this way, so things have a tendency to pull right here. So when there's a little more fat, it doesn't brown as well. So I'm just trying to balance things out. See? Alright. Salt, pepper. Okay, we have to get careful at this point. See, I still need my pan to be really hot to finish my last batch, but I don't want it to start burning. All right, last. now I'm going to put the carrots and the onions in its place. All of it. And I'm just gonna saute them just for a few minutes until they're softened up. Again, remember, season as you go. So I'm gonna season those a little bit too. And by the time your dish is finished, you should actually not have to season a whole lot because you've been building up those seasonings. So onion, carrot, celery in Western cooking, that's what we call the aromatics. In Asian cooking, that would be garlic, scallions or green onions, and fresh ginger. But Western cooking, onions, carrots, and celery, which we don't have in this one, but which is an integral part of stews, really, are what we call the aromatics. Alright, see, the moisture from the vegetables are kind of, all these brown bits right here, all that is flavor. Major flavor. So once these are softened up a little bit, and it's not going to take forever, I'm going to add the garlic and cook for about a minute. The recipe then tells you to drain the excess fat. I mean, at this point, this fat, there's not a whole lot of it left, so I'm not going to drain anything. And I'm kind of against draining the excess fat, especially when, you know, there's not a whole lot of it. Because fat is flavor. I mean, fat has gotten a bad rap in the past 10-20 years because it makes people fat. Yes, and I'm living proof of that. I'm fluffy. But fat is flavor. Fat is good for you. Fat is actually, studies have shown that fat, and especially the good fat like the olive oils, the fat from avocado, all that stuff actually protect your brain against dementia and Alzheimer's. I'll take that. I'd rather be chubby and have all my head rather than skinny and totally gone up there. So anyway, you pick your battle, you pick your poison. I'll keep my fat around. All right. So you can tell, of course, are the carrots going to soften up much in 3 minutes? No. But I can tell the onions are starting to get translucent in places. That's what we want. So, I'm gonna add the garlic. Here it is, and I'm just gonna saute it for about 1 minute. That's it. So at this point, the recipe I gave you said to add the meat now and to add the tomato paste afterwards, but I'm gonna add the tomato paste right now. I like to add it at this point because I can cook it a little bit and the flavor intensifies. I think it's a better choice to add it now. So tomato paste, I like to use those tubes because the recipe only calls for about 2 tablespoons. I don't want to open one of those cans, however small. You always, with the cans, you always end up wasting some. So tomato paste in a tube, I love that. I can squeeze it and then put it back in my fridge for the next recipe. So I'm not going to measure if you will. So 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to coat all my vegetables with it and let it cook, not a whole long, I mean just about a minute. Just gonna go all around the vegetables, and again, by cooking it a little bit, you're intensifying the flavor of it. So when you make your own, if you want to at home, you can either do that or follow the recipe like it tells you to. And that's always where experience comes in. Just kind of tweaking recipes just a little bit like that. But you'll get there. It actually takes years to become good at cooking. It really does. So be patient, mess up a lot, because that's going to teach you so much. I still mess up. I still burn stuff. It's a part of growing. I don't believe even the best chefs are good at everything. There are some things we're better at than others. The world of cuisine, with all the cuisines in the world, is so vast that we'll never be able to master everything. But you're gonna grow. I mean, I keep on learning all the time. And so will you. Alright, so at this point, I'm adding my meat in, my bacon, and see all these juices? I'm adding that too. That is flavor. So all of it right here goes back in here. I am going to stir and add my flour. I forgot what the English term is for that. In French, we have a verb for it. We call it singer. Singer means to add a little flour, which is going as the stew just simmers, just thicken the sauce a little bit. So I think the recipe, I can't remember, I think it calls for 2 tablespoons of flour. Let me check. Yeah, 2 tablespoons of flour. So alright, 1 tablespoon. And 2. So stir it, make sure the flour coats everything in there. And once you can't see traces of it anymore, we're gonna add our liquids. So in this case, 3 cups of wine and 2 cups of beef stock. And at this point I will add my herbs. The recipe calls for 1 cube of beef bouillon. Couldn't find that at the store, so they gave me granulated bouillon instead, but 1 teaspoon of this equals 1 cube. So let me add 3 cups of wine and 2 cups of beef stock. All right, so I'm gonna stir. So see, braising, the liquid does not cover up the meat. You can still see it sticking out. So at this point, calls for 2 bay leaves. This one was kind of smaller, so I'm gonna put 3. I'm gonna put my herbs. And I'm gonna bring this to a simmer. And of course, one teaspoon of those granules. So on my stove right here, I don't think you see it, but I have an oval burner. So I'm gonna switch to it right now. The reason I didn't use it right away is that this burner, the oval one, is not as powerful as my burner right here. So I'd rather, I would rather brown my meat on my more powerful burner. But so you want to bring this to a simmer, which I'm gonna do right here on this burner. So if you don't have an oval burner like I do, which most stoves don't, and you're gonna buy one of those Dutch oven, I really recommend you buy a round one. A round Dutch oven, because that's gonna work on everything. Okay, so at this point, the original recipe says to add the pearl onions right now. I think it's too early because this is gonna cook for 2.5 to 3 hours. It's too long. Those pearl onions would be totally destroyed. So I will add them about half an hour before we're done. There will be mushrooms that go in here too, about 1 pound, that we will saute before, and that I will add at the very end of cooking. So I'm gonna stop the video right now and I will come back. So this, I'm bringing this to a simmer. So remember, simmer and boiling, 2 different things. Boiling, it's very big bubbles that break out the surface. The movement is pretty violent. Simmering, those big bubbles barely break the surface. It's a gentle simmer, and that's exactly what we want. So anyway, it says to cover it up. I will once this comes to a simmer, and I'm gonna let it be for probably a good 2.5 hours, and that's it. So right now it smells very much of kind of wine and raw very acidic wine, but that acidity is going to disappear as it simmers, and the alcohol is going to be totally cooked out of it. Okay. So I will see you guys a little later. I'm going to clean up because I have a lot of cleaning up to do. I'm going to peel my pearl onions in preparation of later, and I'm gonna get my mushrooms ready in the meantime before that's done. And maybe I will make some mashed potatoes to serve with it too. All right, I will see you guys later for when it's almost done for the finishing. See you in a couple of hours. Bye-bye.